If you're anything like me, you have been seeing Grammarly ads everywhere. They've been all over your YouTube homepage. They have been the ad that plays before the start of every video. You've seen all of your favorite creators promoting them, and they're in the mid-roll ads for every single video basically on YouTube. I tended to roll my eyes at these ads, skip them, maybe click the little "this ad isn't relevant to me" or "I'm not interested" button.
Yeah, no thanks.
Until one particular ad came up on my homepage. And this wasn't an ad where the people are half underwater in their dorm room, although I'll be talking about that a little bit more later in the video. And this wasn't an ad where the office suddenly becomes a sports arena and there are announcers talking about the appropriate way to email a colleague. Instead, this is a video of an ordinary man who is by no means an influencer. As far as I'm aware from my LinkedIn research, he's a man called Zachary who works at Grammarly as their senior product marketing manager. And in this video, he talks about how students can use Grammarly to improve their paraphrasing and their tone. There's nothing too crazy about this ad. As I said, it's just him sitting down, no flashy visuals, until he says, let's say, for example, I want to write a paper on sustainability.
Say I'm working on a research paper about the future of renewable energy, and I come across a study with findings I want to include in my paper.
And the source that he is trying to paraphrase that's shown in the video is talking about how climate change is a really huge issue in modern day. And I thought that that was a wild thing to put on a Grammarly advertisement, especially the specific kind of generative AI that he's suggesting students use when trying to write this hypothetical renewable energy paper. In fact, I texted my cousin right when I watched this advertisement saying, using an LLM to write a sustainability paper, what the hell is going on? And he replied, haha, you've got to break a few eggs to make average global temperature increase beyond the environment destroying threshold, which I think is a much better summary of the situation than I could ever give. Before I talk about why I think this ad from Grammarly is not even particularly problematic, but it just made me stop in my tracks and be like, why are we doing this? I want to talk about my own experiences using Grammarly. The Writing Assistant launched in 2009 and was primarily used as a browser extension or an add-in onto Google Docs. Me personally, I used it as a Google Chrome extension and I used it on Google Docs. I particularly used it for writing important emails or looking at important documents. At the time, it didn't have any generative AI components to it, and so I purely used it for checking my spelling and grammar before sending something off. Obviously, I would give everything a once over if it's something actually important, but some of the time you miss those things, and so I appreciated when it clocked certain grammar mistakes that I would have otherwise missed. But I ended up getting rid of Grammarly as an extension and turning it off, not because of what I'm going to talk about in this video, but actually I found it really annoying the way that it always tried to correct my tone and style rather than just looking at the grammar, which is like the main thing that I wanted it for, and obviously like what the name suggests its purpose is. But it would always prioritize being succinct over style, and I feel like it completely took away from my tone of voice or my creativity when I wrote, because it would choose certain words or certain language that I just would never say as an individual, which totally makes sense because the way that Grammarly works is that it uses GPT-3, which I'm going to talk about a bit more later. But aside from that, it's particularly trained on business emails and business papers, workplace communications, and other anonymized things that are used primarily in the corporate world.
I was a businessman doing business.
And so it makes sense that it would suggest words that are very corporate, but that wasn't what I was writing, and that's not what I would want to be writing. Even when I worked in an office job, I didn't necessarily care about using corporate language. Like I would never say, let's take this offline or let's circle back to this or anything like that. And so I ended up turning it off like quite a few years ago. I haven't used it in a while because I just found it annoying. In April 2023, a long time after I personally stopped using Grammarly, they decided to launch a generative AI product. This AI product was built on GPT-3 large language models. It can generate and write content, help people with devising outlines, help people with brainstorming, summarizing, all of the things that we've come to expect from large language models like ChatGPT, for example, and is generally advertised to be used in an academic or a professional setting. This generative AI aspect of Grammarly is the product that is being advertised and is being used as a tool to help with sustainability research. You may have heard terms like GPT and LLM floating around, particularly in association with OpenAI's ChatGPT. That's sort of become interchangeable with AI in media, especially social media. And so before we move on to the rest of the video, I just wanted to clarify what those things actually mean. LLM stands for large language model and is a type of computational model that is used for natural language processing. So by natural language, I mean the language that humans use. So that could be used for something like text generation or translation or summarizing, things like that. GPT, on the other hand, which stands for generative pre-trained transformer, is a type of LLM or large language model. So it's a subset within that wider category. GPT is trained on huge data sets. So you can have large language models that are smaller than GPT, despite what the name suggests. But GPT in particular is trained on a huge amount of data, which is why it's so good at what it does. And it also uses this data that is trained on to generate content that sounds human. So the generative part of GPT is that it can create new content, that when you put a prompt into ChatGPT, for example, the output is some kind of answer. It generates something new. The pre-trained part means that it has already been taught how to do stuff. So from the large amounts of data that it has looked at, it is being told how to perform a certain output or how to achieve a goal or how to solve a specific problem. And the transformer part, which is the part that I struggled to understand the most, and if you're an engineer, please feel free to correct me in the comments below. I'm pretty sure I have this right, but from my understanding, the transformer part means that it's able to process all portions of the input in parallel and at the same time, rather than looking at each word one by one in sequential order. And this transformer architecture means that GPT is, one, much more efficient, and two, because it's looking at all of the words in parallel rather than one by one, it's able to understand within context, which is a lot more useful for natural language processing, because if you put in a specific input, you want it to be able to look at the context or the sentence in which you've said those words, not just the words individually and the order that they go in. GPT-3, which we'll be talking about in this video because that's the thing that Grammarly uses for its generative AI products, is just the third iteration of GPT. So GPT is created by OpenAI, which is a company, and they're the company behind ChatGPT, for example. So GPT-3 is just the third iteration or the third version of the GPT that they've created. They're currently on GPT-4. So I believe the most recently released one is GPT-4o, which is just a different version of this fourth iteration. Each GPT is significantly better and more capable than the previous one due to an increase in size and an increase in training. So GPT-3 in particular, I believe, was quite a big leap from GPT-2, and the things it was kind of known for, or what was notable about this progression, was that it was a lot better at generating code, and it was a lot better at creative endeavors like storytelling. So hopefully all of those definitions and explanations make sense, and I can start talking about why I'm actually being a hater about this Grammarly ad. You might be thinking to yourself, okay, I get everything you're saying, but what makes this so bad? Isn't it good that we're using AI to look at sustainability? Perhaps we can even use AI to fight against climate change. You might have seen news reports or things in the media about how AI can help us with improving the environment. You might even agree with Dr. Eric Schmidt, who's the ex-CEO of Google, who suggested that we aren't going to meet our climate goals anyway. The world is falling to pieces. We're not going to stop climate change, so we might as well invest all of our resources into AI in stopping climate change rather than preventing AI and slowing its capabilities now in the name of helping the environment, because we're not going to be able to do it anyway.
My own opinion is that we're not going to hit the climate goals anyway, because we're not organized to do it. And the way to do it is with the things that we're talking about now. And yes, the needs in this area will be a problem, but I'd rather bet on AI solving the problem than constraining it and having the problem, if you see my point.
What Dr. Schmidt fails to mention, in my opinion, is that, one, we have no idea that AI will solve the climate crisis. There might be a good chance that it will, but we have no reason to think that generative AI is going to solve the climate crisis. And that's hedging your bets a lot. That's putting a lot of faith into something that most average people don't understand. I'm doing an MSc in AI ethics, and I still had to spend a lot of time researching what the heck the transformer part of GPT meant. So the average person doesn't have a good understanding of AI, and to tell people, you just have to trust that it's all going to work out. We're going to give up with helping the environment because you have to trust that AI is going to magically solve these problems. The second thing that I think Dr. Schmidt ignores is the fact that people are dying and people are suffering from climate change right now. So many people, especially in lower income countries, don't have time to wait for this magical AI solution that may or may not appear because they are being screwed over by climate change right now. And the third thing that I think he ignores is that we have solutions to alleviate climate change currently, which are to use less energy and to use less fossil fuels. But that's something that big tech companies that are creating these AI models don't want us to focus on. They want us to focus on the idea that AI is going to help solve all these problems, not that AI is potentially contributing to the problems associated with climate change. Training these LLMs has required an insane amount of energy. For example, GPT-3, which is what Grammarly uses, used 1,287 megawatt hours to train. When I read that statistic, I was like, I don't know if that's a lot of energy or a little amount of energy, but that is equivalent to the average American household using energy for 120 years. You could argue, and I think that this is a fair argument, that this was a one-time thing. Once you train these models, we're good. Like, we can use GPT-3 and we don't have to train it again. Never mind that there are future iterations with more training, but whatever, that's beside the point. Let's say we train this model one time, we just have to accept that this is a one-time usage that we're going to be okay with. But we also have to consider the amount of energy that each use of GPT takes up. The explosive growth of artificial intelligence has led to huge increases in the amount of energy that data centers use. Just to flag, data centers aren't necessarily used by LLMs or by GPT. They are also used to host cryptocurrency or things on the cloud or smartphone apps. So I'm not saying that like everything to do with data centers is to do with GPT or LLMs. But there has been a huge increase in this energy usage of data centers because of the rise of generative AI. For example, AI data centers that train large language models use 4 times as much energy as data centers used for cloud applications. Current data center usage stands at 460 terawatts in 2022 and could increase to between 620 and 1,050 terawatts by 2026. This is the amount of energy consumption of Sweden and Germany, respectively. Google's greenhouse gas emissions in 2023 were 48% higher than they were in 2019. Its goal over the last few years has been to reach net zero emissions by 2030, but considering that it's already 2024 and they are just increasing the amount of energy that they're using, and they've said that AI is going to make it very, very difficult to reach this goal, this seems like this 2030 goal of net zero emissions is just not going to happen. Microsoft similarly pledged back in 2020 that they were going to be carbon neutral by 2030, but now their president, Brad Smith, has said that back in 2020, this goal was a carbon moonshot, and that AI now has made the moon 5 times further away. They still maintain that they are working towards that goal, but it just seems like all these big tech companies are saying that AI is going to make meeting these goals more and more unlikely. And it's not just big tech firms that are reneging on their climate targets. For example, residents in the low-income neighborhood of North Omaha in Nebraska were celebrating when they were told that the power plant that is powered by coal in their neighborhood would be closing by 2023. People in this neighborhood, primarily people of color, are suffering from some of the worst air pollution in the area, as well as succumbing to respiratory diseases such as asthma due to this coal power plant. Although they were told that coal usage would stop in 2023, when it came to the deadline, the power company behind this power plant decided that they were going to continue burning coal. The big reason for this is that there are fast-growing data centers in the area owned by Google and Meta who have super high energy/electricity requirements. The presence of these data centers has led to such a huge increase in electricity demands that shutting down these coal power plants would mean that the electricity system in North Omaha would basically be non-functional. Now the power company claims that they will be burning coal until 2026, but as residents there have said, there's no reason for them to believe that that will actually happen this time. In a particularly fun, ironic twist, Grammarly has lots and lots of advertisements where there are people who are drowning or being submerged in water, claiming that they're swamped with work, they're drowning in these deadlines. They didn't think that they were this far underwater.
I'm swamped. No one told me college would be so damp.
Just get Grammarly.
We're gonna be underwater for weeks.
I'm already so pruny.
This is fixable. Just use Grammarly.
The whole bit of these ads is that these people are trying to keep afloat in a huge pool of water. Unfortunately, water is another huge resource that is being drained by LLMs due to needing it for the cooling systems within these data centers. Microsoft reportedly consumed 6.4 million cubic liters of water in 2022, which is a 34% increase from just the year before of 2021. Google had a similar but somewhat smaller increase of 20%. Although there's a huge host of reasons for why their water consumption increased, considering Google and Microsoft's own claims about AI and the amount of energy that it needs, it's probably highly likely that the water increase is due to being used in cooling systems for data centers for LLMs. Associate Professor Xiaolei Ren, who has been studying the water consumption needed for computation for the last decade, estimates that a person who enters into a question and answer session with GPT-3, so a back and forth of like 10 to 50 questions, uses about half a liter of fresh water. So keep in mind next time you're asking ChatGPT some random questions that you don't necessarily need a large language model to answer for you, that you are probably consuming a lot of water in doing so. In the Dalles in Oregon, where Google currently has 3 data centers and plans to build 2 more, the city's government filed a lawsuit to try and keep a secret from farmers, environmentalists, activists, and Native American tribes that were worried about water usage in the area, how much water Google was actually using. A few years later, the city decided to withdraw this suit, and when the records were made public, it was revealed that Google used a quarter of the city's water supply just on these 3 data centers. In Chile, which has currently been in a drought for 15 years, where the government is rationing water supplies and there are deadly wildfires spreading that leave hundreds of people dead and thousands of people displaced, Google is trying to use their water for cooling systems in data centers. A Chilean environmental court has now partially reversed Google's permit in building the data centers in the country, and Google has now said that they'll be using air cooling instead of water cooling for these data centers. But the point still stands that we as a society are prioritizing these big tech companies creating data centers that use huge amounts of resources in order for us to use generative AI. And we care about that more than people's access to water for cooking and cleaning and being able to drink and live. I think it's crazy for a government to ration how much water you can have to live and then be fine giving that water to a big tech company for cooling systems. Obviously, these big tech companies have the money to pay these governments in order for them to act in this manner, but I don't think that we as a society should think that that's an acceptable use of resources. And that's why I think that these Grammarly ads that utilize GPT-3 showing tons of water that people are drowning in is kind of in poor taste. It's really ridiculous for Grammarly to promote their generative AI by showing its capabilities on researching a sustainability paper and a paper that concentrates on renewable energy. Yes, it would be good if these data centers ran on renewable energy. No one's saying that that wouldn't be good. And it would also be good if AI could find a solution to that. But currently, right now, that's not what these data centers are being run on. When Grammarly's AI product utilizes GPT-3, and people who work there probably do know about the environmental impacts that it has, it's just like in really poor taste to me to be making these kinds of advertisements. Of course, Grammarly is not the only company that utilizes these large language models. ChatGPT is created by OpenAI, who have created these GPT models in the first place. Meta has Llama, Microsoft has Copilot, Anthropic has Claude, which is supposed to be a more ethical form of AI, but is still really heavily utilizing data centers and causing a huge unnecessary energy drain. So I'm not saying that this is Grammarly specific, I'm just saying that this ad that I saw with Grammarly is what prompted me to make this video. And if you use any of these LLMs, I'm not saying that you're like a bad person in any shape or form. Like, I've personally used ChatGPT to understand why an error has appeared in a piece of code that I wrote for a data science class. Or the other day, I was really annoyed at myself because I used Gemini that was pre-installed in my phone because I have a Google phone to take a picture of my light bulb because I didn't understand how to unscrew the light bulb from my ceiling. LLMs are useful and they do have their place in the world. I'm not saying that they don't. And I think that AI is a really important tool in today's society. I think it's been really useful for things like improving medical imaging or improving drug discovery. I think that those things are really important and that we should continue to do those things. But my general advice is before you install Grammarly and use it to help you with workplace communication or use it to help you with your academic writing, that you could consider, do I actually really need to use a large language model, or are there other tools at my disposal, digital or otherwise, that could help me with my task? So that's it. That's my thought on this Grammarly ad. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and comment down below anything you would like to comment down below. If you would like to see more videos like this from me talking about AI ethics, then please make sure you subscribe and turn on your notification bell so that you're notified every time I post a new video. Thank you for watching.